Okay, hello. I am going to be reviewing Rushmore, Wes Anderson's second film from the 90s. Obviously, Wes is coming out with a new movie just this month, May 30th, The Phonecian Scheme, which I'm very excited about. And in preparation for that, I will be doing a ranked video of all of his movies, but he's got like 10 or 11, so I didn't want to have to review in length all of them in one video. So some of his more significant, more iconic films, I'm going to be reviewing more in depth before that, just so that video isn't super long. I chose Rushmore because this is his second film and feels like one of the most significant in his career, one of the first ones that put him on the map and define him as a filmmaker. All that being said, it's not necessarily one of my favorites from him. I think it's really good, but isn't necessarily as great as a lot of stuff he would go on to do. But this is like a really good foundation for his very specific style of filmmaking. It stars Jason Schwartzman and Bill Murray, as well as Olivia Williams as Mrs. Cross, I think her name is, the teacher that they both kind of fall in love with and have a rivalry over. This marks his first collaboration between both Schwartzman and Murray, who would go on to be two of the most significant actors in his, recurring troupe of people. Both of them have led multiple of his films, and generally they're the two actors that I most associate with Wes. They're the first ones I think about when I think about the ridiculously stacked casts that he has gone on to have in his career. I'll start with Jason Schwartzman, who is delivering a pretty solid performance here. Really funny, a lot of really great iconic lines, and just a very iconic character. I think one of the first examples of Wes Anderson's obsession with like children who act like adults. He seems to think that's really funny for some reason, and it is pretty funny in this movie. I think one of the best gags is the plays that Max puts on that are like really mature, and like he puts on a play of Serpico and one of like an Apocalypse Now-esque Vietnam War thing that's like incredibly violent and like also has a ridiculous budget to it. Max is just this very ambitious and committed character, and that sort of endears the audience to him. He's also someone who has lost his mother recently, but all of that can't really help the fact that my main criticism of this film is his unlikability. He is kind of a sociopath near the end of this movie, very creepy, very stalkery a lot of the time. And Schwartzman is, again, trying his best to endear the character to the audience, but in some instances, the script is really working against him in that department. It gets really hard to root for him as he goes on to do very morally questionable things while trying to, get with a teacher. Which leads me to Olivia Williams, someone who I am not familiar with, but is the third lead of this film. Stars as Mrs. Cross, and the other criticism I have is that her character is not very fleshed out really at all. She makes equally questionable decisions as like Max is pursuing her and professing his love for her. She doesn't, kind of point out that this is really creepy and that like, a student and a teacher just can't really be romantically involved with each other. And in some ways, she kind of like spurs it on in certain awkward instances. I think the intention with this screenplay is that Wes wants this to be three very lonely characters who are sort of trying to find connection any way they can in Max and in Bill Murray's character. They're both trying to find a connection to this woman, but this woman is grieving the loss of her husband. And that doesn't really get translated very well because we don't get a lot of time with the teacher character separated from Max's perception of her. Everything we see is like from his perspective, and she's more of like a plot point rather than a character. And I think the film could have benefited from really like getting into her loneliness and her sadness. The reason that she's sort of encouraging this relationship with Max is because she's like genuinely lonely, and so yeah, he's a creepy little 15-year-old, but that's the best she can do at this point. Not to say like she wants to date him, but to say like she does see something of her dead husband in him. And I think the idea is that she is, remaining involved with him as a friend simply because she doesn't have anyone else, and she's like seeing something in him. But I don't think they really deliver that very well in the script because this is mainly a coming of age film, it's all entirely focused on Max. And so both her character as well as Bill Murray's character don't get a lot of time to be characters in and of themselves. Bill Murray as Herman is great and immediately works within Wes Anderson's world. He has this like absurd humor to him in certain instances. There's one really funny scene where he like blocks the crap out of a kid playing basketball that I thought was really funny. He just has these like great moments of comedic relief, but his character is like inherently a very sad character, and he handles that like moroseness and that deadpan humor in a way that really only Bill Murray can. Him and Schwartzman's chemistry is really great too. You can like buy the friendship and buy these two characters connecting with each other even if they don't have anything in common on the surface. And this is another great example of something Wes Anderson does really well, which is make very distinctly different characters and then sort of find ways to connect them to each other and endear them to each other and then endear them to the audience. Rushmore is definitely one of his most like solid scripts, in that it has some really great ideas to it, but I do think it's pretty flawed in its execution. Turning away from the screenplay and into the visual aesthetic things going on here, this is the first very distinctly Wes Anderson movie. Bottle Rocket, his debut, does have like some shadings of what he would go on to become as a filmmaker, but this is really like the first example of it, with the montages, with like the jaunty, quirky music, with like the indie rock soundtrack, and just like the general indie film feel here. You also have a lot of symmetrically framed shots, but it also doesn't have like the dollhouse aesthetic that a lot of his later films would have. This is one of his rare films that actually feels like it could occur within our own world. There's a level of absurdity to it, but it's not on the level of like Grand Budapest Hotel or The French Dispatch, where it's like this is a completely different world from the one that we live in. And it doesn't really have that artifice either. Like there is a relatability and an authenticity to what's going on here, both within the characters and within the world that they inhabit. I think that's the main criticism of what Anderson has gone on to do later on, is that he's kind of gone towards the artificiality and away from the relatability of his films, as well as like the emotional tenderness, which is very prevalent here in Rushmore. Again, I do have some complaints with the characters they choose to focus on, but there are a lot of really emotionally powerful and very earnest moments, specifically in the third act of the movie, which I think is its strongest. It balances its humor with its dramatic aspects really well as not letting the quirky aestheticism of it get in the way of it just being a really great dramedy. It's definitely not one of my favorite Anderson movies. I do have a couple of complaints, and there's more characters and storylines that I just emotionally connect to more later on in his films, as well as films that I think are more like visually impressive or just more impressive on a filmmaking level. But I do think this is a really great foundation of his filmmaking and kind of the great introduction to his films. Like if I was going to show someone his films, I would probably start with this one. And I don't know, I think it's good. It's not great. It's kind of like middle of the pack Anderson to me. And I'm someone who actually likes basically all of his movies. So even like middle of the pack is still a really great movie. I would give this a 3.5 out of 5. And yeah, that is all I really have today. So next week I'm going to be reviewing a couple of big releases coming out this weekend. Friendship coming out, cannot wait, that's going to be great. And Hurry Up Tomorrow, the new weekend movie too. And then in a couple weeks I think I'll do Grand Budapest Hotel is my other like long form Anderson review. And then whenever Phonecian Scheme comes out, I will do a in-depth ranking of all his movies, so look out for that. And yeah, that's all I got. Goodbye.